Hello and a very warm welcome to Cultural Communication Confidence with me, Victoria Reynoldson. And welcome back to this episode where we are continuing on the theme of interviews and interview success. Now, last week we talked about specifically how to prepare for interviews and thinking about what you might need to do to research and be in the mindset for interviews, but also the different types of interview and style, and also the types of questions that you might expect. So if you haven't had the chance to listen to that episode, you're very welcome to go back and listen later on. I'll put a link in the show notes for you. Today, I really want to talk about what happens in the interview itself, making a great impression, and also thinking about how do you answer questions. So how do you approach the verbal communication and building rapport with the interviewers? This is the second one, and next time we will be the final one in this series, talking about how to close the interview, handle any difficult questions, and also what you do in the follow-up. But let's come back to today. And I mentioned some statistics last time, which I shared with you. They come from the UK from May 2023, but I think they're really relevant insights to help us as we think about what is important for the interview itself. So let's start with how long an interview lasts. Now, this clearly may vary according to the company or the industry, but the average is 30 to 45 minutes. So actually quite short, less than an hour. 33% of hiring managers claim that they know whether the candidate is the right person within 30 seconds. So that statistic is really fascinating for me because it says absolutely that you have less than a minute to make that great impression in the way that you come across in your body language, how you're standing or sitting if it's a video interview, and how you're saying what you're saying. 30 seconds. This is why it is so important. I also get asked quite frequently, what should I wear to an interview? So what should I even, what clothes should I put on? I think this is something that is an evolution. And if I think about trends, I think generally people have become less formal over time in the workplace. However, about a quarter of hiring managers would still expect somebody to wear a suit to an interview. And that might be, for example, for industries like the financial sector, banking, consulting. But the majority, 55%, say that smart casual is perfectly acceptable. And smart casual just means for men wearing probably a shirt and trousers, but no tie or jacket. For women, again, that would be probably wearing a smart shirt, top or blouse with either trousers or skirt, but no need for suits. So if you're not sure, also you can ask in advance if they do have any specific dress code. Now, when it comes to arriving, remember that 30-second rule. I think it is incredibly important to make a great impression in those early seconds. So first of all, hopefully you've arrived on time. Hopefully you're there with plenty in time, in fact. But if you're not, then really absolutely make sure that you phone up or message your interviewer and let them know as soon as possible. The very worst offense that interviewers say that candidates can commit is being late and not letting them know. It's considered incredibly rude. And so if you are late, don't panic. Make sure that you get in contact. And in fact, the majority of the employers and the majority of the hiring managers are forgiving if you are able to let them know before time and are able usually to accommodate that. Then let's assume you've made it to the interview. Think about what happens in those early moments. If it's a face-to-face interview, how are you greeting the interviewer? How are you shaking their hand? So if you are in a global company or in the UK or the US, the way you shake hands is with moderate firmness. So you don't want to go too strong, too dominant or overpowering. And equally, you don't want to be too soft, which might suggest you're not feeling confident. So your handshake can communicate how you're feeling. Equally, think about how you come across with your eyes. So meet the eyes of your interviewer, smile at them, and be friendly and open in your body language. These are little touches and they can make a very big difference in your nonverbal communication as you are greeting the interviewer before even the interview has formally started. Now, I want to talk specifically about video interviews for a moment because I think there is a particular approach here that we need to be mindful of and to make sure that we are setting ourselves up for success. So, technology, of course, is involved, and I'm sure that most of you who are listening today understand that you need to make sure that you know how to use your technology. But if you are being interviewed on a platform that you are not so familiar with, so let's say you are very familiar with Zoom or Google, but you don't know Teams so well, or maybe they're using a platform called WebEx or one of the many other platforms out there, then make sure you hop onto the platform before the day, try it out, make sure you know how to do things like switch your video on, unmute yourself, and so on. If needs be, practice with a friend or a colleague just to make absolutely sure that you're feeling comfortable before you turn up. Arrive early, make sure that everything is working, that you suddenly can't access something or that your computer is about to switch off for a update. So just make sure you're arriving in plenty of time and that you're feeling calm and ready for the interview. There's nothing worse than rushing at the last minute for a video interview, and it won't make a great impression in those early stages. Also think about, what does behind you look like? Now, this is a conscious choice. So think about what the interviewer can see. You might go for a natural background, such as I have here now. Or you might choose to have a virtual background or a blurred background if you're not so comfortable sharing your home environment. And that is totally fine. But whatever you go for, make sure it's a conscious choice, that it looks good, and also that you are very visible. So you want to make sure that you have natural light ideally, and that light is coming from in front of you. So if you have a window behind you, then the interviewer won't be able to see your face very well, and that won't be very helpful when it comes to them reading your nonverbal cues. If you are interviewing, say, on a dark afternoon, or you're in a different time zone and it's nighttime with you, then just use lights and lamps to help with the lighting. So just make sure your face is visible. Other things to think about is, how do you come across with your nonverbal communication? So the issue with video interviews is, of course, that you only are seeing, the person is only seeing the top half of you. And when it comes to hands, the hands have to be lifted up from where you would normally be gesturing so that it can be seen in the screen. When I'm usually face to face with somebody, my hands would be further down towards my stomach area. And as you can see, you can't see my hands right now. When it comes to videos, I tend to try and bring them up. And that's particularly important in interviews where seeing your hands is a demonstration of trust and openness. So that is quite important. I'm just going to check if there's anything else I wanted to share here. I think the only other thing is, clearly you need to make sure your environment is ready. So what that means is that it's quiet. Anybody who is around the home, if you're doing it from your home, is briefed and is being as quiet as possible. Clearly, it would not be appropriate to try and do this from a busy space, such as a co-working space, an open plan office, or even from a cafe. That just would not come across as professional. And equally, I would be dressing for video interviews as you would as if you were going to an actual face-to-face interview. So that is quite important. So that's particularly some ideas for video interviews. And I hope that's helpful. Now let's talk about actual face-to-face interviews. Actually, these tips work for both, but how do you approach answering the questions? That's really the topic for the next part. There is always a sense of nerves going into interviews. No matter how well prepared you are, no matter how researched, how much time you have thinking about the questions and working on your confidence mindset, it's natural to feel those nerves. And that's where we need to therefore think about ways to help us with that. So I spoke about in the last episode about being really clear about why you want to work for this company and get this particular role. If you know your why, you will be motivated and you'll come across as more enthusiastic and warm and genuinely passionate about what it is you want to do with this company. When I looked at the statistics earlier, I saw that 4 in 10 employers will reject a candidate who is lacking in enthusiasm. So bear this in mind. This is really important criteria that employers are using to judge who it is they're going to actually put the offer to. It's not enough to be the most skilled, the most experienced, or have the most knowledge. You need to be able to create that rapport. So be clear about your why. When you're asked a question, it's absolutely fine to take a moment to pause, to collect your thoughts before you reply. When we're nervous, what tends to happen is we tend to rush and we might end up trying to jump into answering a question without fully listening to what the question is that we've been asked. So make sure you're fully paying attention to the interviewer, listen to the question, and make sure you answer that specific question. When you reply, with your verbal communication, think about how you're speaking. You want to speak slowly and clearly and take your time with your answer. It's absolutely fine to pause occasionally, to collect your thoughts again, and to continue with your reply. Generally speaking, though, you don't want to make your answers too long, but you want to give really specific answers and give examples. Now, particularly if you are interviewing with companies based in the UK or the US, or global companies that have headquarters in these regions, then it is really important to talk about your personal achievements. That's because the cultures are individualist, and that means there is a real focus on talking about your personal achievements. If you're interviewing, however, with cultures such as in Asia, which are more collectivist cultures, you might want to emphasize not only your personal achievements, but also the team achievements, talking more about what the team achieved together and what your role was within that. Now, it sometimes happens that you don't understand a question, and that can happen. I know with my clients who are often having English as their second language, they're not so sure sometimes whether they fully understood a question. And that's okay to stop, to clarify, to play back what you think the question is about, or to even ask the interviewer to rephrase it in a different way. It is much better to do this than to pretend you've understood and answer a totally different question. Challenging questions, unexpected questions, of course, will come up. And I'll talk a bit more about this next time. But again, the main thing here to remember is just to pause, to try and gather your thoughts and think about something you could reply with, even if it's a simple answer, and to explain these are your first thoughts. I'm just checking my details, but I think that's everything I was going to share here about answering questions. There are many specific techniques for answering different styles of question, and I'm not going to go into these here and now. That would be way too long for this specific podcast episode. However, I do hope that you have found some useful ideas here, thinking about what is important to hiring managers and employers when they're meeting their candidates. How do you best arrive and make that very important first impression? Remember the statistics that there is a percentage of hiring managers who make that judgment within 30 seconds about who they're going to hire. Also, I hope I've given you some really useful tips around video interviews and how best to turn up and maximize your presence in that kind of environment, as well as how to answer questions and to make sure that you're building rapport and listening well during the interview process. So as we come to the end of today, remember today is really about what happens during the interview process. Next time we're going to talk about when you have the difficult questions, but also how to close the interview well and how to follow up appropriately. So let me ask you some reflection questions. When have you had a positive interview experience? What elements of this have you got right with your verbal communication and non-verbal communication? Which of parts of this do you think are new elements for you to learn from and to consider as part of being ready for the day when you go in for the interview? I'd love to know, so please feel free to reach out and let me know. And as we come to the end of today's episode, I wanted to let you know that if you are somebody who is job searching right now, or maybe you're thinking about going for a new job in the next 6 months, then I have a brand new group program launching in the next few weeks, which is called Interview Success. This 5-week group program is absolutely focused on getting you ready for this incredibly important stage. So helping you with preparing, research, understanding how to answer very specific types of questions, and then how to make the most of the opportunity when you're meeting the interviewer, but also afterwards. So we're going to go through that in details across 5 weeks in a small group of a maximum of 10 people. Now that particular program is going to be £499, so £499, and I'm offering 2 bonuses for you. The first one is I will do a mini CV or resume review for anybody who books on this, and I'm also going to offer a 1-session, 1-to-1 individual interview with me so you can get my feedback. So if you're job searching, I hope you will find that incredibly valuable. I would highly recommend that you contact me to find out more about this program and book on. To do that, you can go to www.culturecuppa, spelled CUPPA.com/contact. So that's www.culturecuppa.com/contact. And I'll send you all the details of the program. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you found this episode helpful to you. If you know somebody who is going through interviews right now or is about to start job searching, then please do share this particular podcast episode with them, and also the one from last week, as I think they will find this incredibly useful as part of their preparations. In the meantime, thank you so much for joining me here today for this episode, and I look forward to seeing you next time on Cultural Communication Confidence.